en route.
Hello and welcome back. I wanted to tell you that this video you're going to see I recorded previously, and I wanted to let you know that if you watch the whole thing, you're going to see some bonus video footage after the 20-minute mark on this. So if you want to stay till the end, that's awesome. You'll be able to see the bonus videos that I put at the end of this. I also want to let you know that this video is about a lot of the items that you're going to want to check and that you're going to need to know about before you purchase a C4 Corvette for doing whatever you want with it. I want to let you know that this is all items that I've come across while rebuilding my Vettes, my C4s, items that I've seen not only in my 85s but in my 88, which is right over there behind me, or nope, not behind me, behind you. Anyway, and I want you to enjoy the video. Thank you very much, and smash that like button. It really does help out the channel, and if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Thank you again, and enjoy. Hi, today I wanted to go over some of the things to look for when you go out and purchase your C4 Corvette. What you need to understand is these cars are 25 to 35 years old, and that there's going to be a lot of things that even a stored Corvette is going to have issues with just because of time. Now granted, a lot of these Corvettes that you're going to find on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace are going to be in horrible condition, and there's going to be a few that are priced for the condition they're in all the way down. So this Corvette I got off Facebook Marketplace, and the red C4 85 Corvette that I have, I got that off Craigslist. So in the maroon 88 Corvette I got that off Facebook Marketplace as well. So a lot of photos that you're going to see of these cars for sale are going to hide a lot of things. When you go out to look at these cars, you're going to need to go through quite a few items on the car to make sure that it's worth it. I knew when I bought all three of them, that I was going to be doing some work to these cars, and I knew that up front. I knew that there was a possibility of doing engine work, transmission work, and interior work. This car got it all. I don't if you've watched the videos for this car. I've had to rebuild the top of the motor to take care of the blown head gasket. I've had to totally gut the interior and redo the interior except for the dash and the dash pad, which I was very lucky. This dash pad has no cracks in it. I had to redo all the weather stripping around this thing. I had to replace the antenna. I had to basically rebuild this car from years of neglect. So I'm going to try and save you some time and money, starting with the engine. Check the fluids. If the oil smells burnt, that could be mechanical issues within the engine, and or your rings are gone on the pistons. If you see or smell antifreeze, either leaking out of the engine or steam from the side of the engine, that's usually an antifreeze leak. A lot of times on these engines, what happens is when they were sitting is the freeze plugs on the engines corroded, or if they use the wrong antifreeze on these, the freeze plugs corroded and the heater core corroded. And at one point in time, after pressurizing, coming up the temperature, it just let loose on the plug. That's what on the maroon Corvette that's over there. I'm rebuilding the engine on that, and that's exactly what happened on that. It has an antifreeze leak, and the cores and the freeze plugs were corroded away, a couple of them. And I knew that when I bought it, so that's Not an issue to me, because I knew what it was when I was going into it. Anyway, check the color of the antifreeze. Check the oil and its color and its smell. If it smells burnt and you don't want to do an engine rebuild, walk away. Transmission, check the fluid on level ground. Does it smell burnt? If it smells burnt, you're going to be looking at transmission work needing to be done. Check the condition of the hoses that come from the radiator. Check the condition of the power steering reservoir and pump and its hoses. I got lucky on the red one. I just had to tighten the reservoir's hose connections and my power steering fluid leak went away. Check the brake master cylinder reservoirs. Brake fluid is clear. I'm going to say this one more time. Brake fluid is clear. If there's any color in your brake fluid, like brown, chocolate syrup looking, it needs to be flushed. Your brakes will need to be flushed. You can see the video that I've created on how to flush the brakes, brake fluid from your Vette on the channel. When you go to start it, does it start up right away, or did the owner say, yeah, just turn the key on, wait a few seconds, and then start it? That means it's priming the fuel rail. That means you have a pressure leak somewhere for the fuel rail. Most likely it's the pump in the gas tank that's allowing the fuel to depressurize and come back to the tank, or somehow drain it, or you have an open or stuck open injector that's releasing all the pressure when you shut it off. It could be any number of those things. Your fuel filter on these is right down under here next to the frame rail on this side. Check the condition of that. Does it look like it's been replaced, or is it old, crusty, and covered in surface rust? You're going to want to check the drive axle by jacking it up, grabbing hold of the drive axle, and turning it. If you hear clunk, 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 or click, 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 you could have bad universals, or the tail of the transmission could be a problem in the tail of the transmission. There's a piece that goes on the transmission on the tail that you're going to have to check. If you see transmission fluid leaking from the pan, or from the bell housing, or from the rear of the transmission, you're going to have to check that and replace those seals. On this one I did a seal and filter, and that solved my transmission leaking problem. On the red 85 Corvette, I just had to tighten the transmission bolts, and then the leak went away. Check around the top of the gas tank, looking for rust. If it's really rusty around the top of the gas tank, that usually means that rust has gotten into the actual tank, and or water has been over time pooling on top of the tank, and that's not a good sign. Look for surface rust on the outside of the tank. If the rubber safety boot in the back isn't there, and basically there's a rubber boot that goes around the gas tank filler neck, and it moves water and other items away from the tank, down a tube, and down to the ground. If that rubber mat isn't there, that means that everything has been pouring on top of that tank. If the tube has been clogged, that'll back up with water and get on top of the tank and rust it. You don't want rust inside your gas tank. The rear differential, you want to check the half shafts coming out of that by jacking the car up, grabbing hold of each side of one of the wheels and going like turning the wheel and listening for clicks and clunks in that. You're going to want to put it in neutral and spin the wheel and listen for any clicks or clunks inside of the actual differential. When checking the engine, you want to listen to the engine noises when it's running. If you have a mechanic's stethoscope, great. If you don't have a mechanic's stethoscope, go buy a cheap long screwdriver. Take that screwdriver, put it on top of part of the engine, take the other piece, and put it on your ear. You will be able to hear what's going on in the engine in that general location through that. And you can move it, and you can tell where things are clicking, clacking, and rapping within the engine by that method. If you've got squeals in the front, a lot of times it came from the idler pulley, at least on this car and on my red one. It came from the idler pulley. There was also a worn out air pump on the gray Corvette that I had to get a replacement for off eBay. The bearings inside the air pump had just been shot, and I'm still looking for a place to rebuild them. So I had to replace that. Other things is, does the AC work? Has the AC been converted to a more modern AC pump and system? Does the heater core work? Does the heating work in the car? Does the fan on the heater control or environmental control system work? You know, does it low to high? Does the rear defroster work? Is the rear defroster connected? Are the wires soldered properly to the rear defroster lines in the window? Then getting to the interior. The interior is not cheap. If you're going to be looking at doing a bunch of interior work, you're going to have to spend about $800 on carpets. You're going to have to spend about $500 per door panel, complete door panel. Then you're going to have the door bezel, and then the actual door handle. Inside the window strips, if the outside strips are cracked and stuff, you're going to have to replace them. I got door panels that came complete with that weather strip. You're going to have to look at the felt window track blocks in the door. Make sure that they aren't worn away, broken, or misaligned, so your window's closed. You're going to have to look at the weather stripping and see if it's cracked all the way around in every bit of weather stripping. That means on the rear hatch, around the target top, around the window, and around the headliner, and around the door. In the firewall, in the cowl, there are weep holes that you're going to have to clean out. If you don't clean them out, it builds up with water. There is also body putty put in between the pieces of body panel when they were assembling this car at the factory. Most likely after 25 to 35 years, that's all cracked apart. You're going to have to fill those in to keep water from seeping in and getting into the interior of the car. You're going to have to clean out the cowl. That's of all the dirt, leaves, seeds, whatever that's fallen in there over time. Also check the condition of your wipers. Do they go down all the way? Are they hidden behind here, like so? Mine pop up here. I'm okay with it. On the red one, they go down all the way. On this one, they stick up a little bit right there at the end. I'm okay with that. You want to check your headlights to make sure that they rotate up. If they don't, or like one goes up, one doesn't, check the wiring connections inside the nose cone or inside the nose well. And on this one, when the passenger one didn't want to go up, it was a loose wire connector on the connection. Your radiator, if you're running into overheating while you're driving, there's an air dam, and if you bought one or know it, the radiator sits at an angle. The air dam allows air to come in from underneath the front of the car. What happens is that fills up with leaves and other crud, like, you know, the plastic bags that you sometimes find floating on the road and you try and avoid because you don't want it in your radiator. If you're running into overheating problems and you have enough antifreeze in there and the fan on the car is turning on at the proper temperature, depending on what you have on the engine for the temperature sensor that operates the electric fans, check that and clean it out. That's the other thing. When this is running, make sure that the radiator fans turn on. You don't want to have to replace a bad temperature sensor on these. Make sure that the oil gauge is reading right. Make sure that the oil pressure sending unit is correct. And the reason I ask that is to get to them, you got to take the distributor out because it's behind the motor back here. On the rear of the engine above the transmission. When you take it out for a test drive, you want to not only check the engine, but you also want to check the transmission. Make sure that it shifts properly. So what you want to do is you want to stick it, if it's an automatic, stick it in overdrive and step on the gas and slowly pick up. You should feel it shift from first to second to drive to overdrive, nice and smoothly, and you know you don't hear a clunk in between the shifting. It doesn't go into the next gear really hard. When you're slowing down, you should also feel that as it slows down, that it goes into the next gear nice and smoothly as it goes down as you're coming to a stop. That'll also check the brakes. When you're out there doing your drive and testing, you want to make sure you check the braking. You also want to know that when you're turning turns, that the car doesn't do this like a boat on water. If it's doing this, then you're going to be looking at shocks and other items within the suspension. If you're turning and it binds at one spot for a little bit, that could be bad rack and pinion. You're going to want to check the differential fluid. Do not pull the drain plug of the differential before you remove the fill plug of the differential. What's happened sometimes is people couldn't get the fill plug to come out, so they just went and they undid the drain plug and then realized when they tried to fill it back up with differential fluid that they couldn't. Never remove the drain plug of the differential without first checking that you can undo the fill plug. The fill plug is where you check the level of the differential fluid anyway. On level ground, you should undo the differential fluid nut, screw, or whatever it is on yours on the fill plug, and you should see some differential fluid come out. Now, differential fluid should be smooth, not feel gritty, and be like a light grayish color. Depending, well, on what I run, it's light grayish. The color of your differential fluid may vary, but that's how I know in all my differentials that one, it's not worn and old, and two, it doesn't have any grit in it. When you get the fill plug open and you go to drain it, if you're lucky enough to have a magnet at the end of the drain plug on your differential, look for excessive amounts of metal shavings. A few metal shavings, that's okay. A lot of metal shavings, that's a warning sign that something is wrong inside the differential. Don't go run off and change it. Take a photo of it, take the filings, put them in a plastic bag, put it all back together, fill it back up, blah, blah, blah. And bring the filings to the mechanic. Say, hey, I found this on the end of my differential. What do you think? You know, and when I say excessive amounts, I'm talking if you've got a thumbnail size amount, that's an excessive amount. When you're checking the transmission and engine oil, if either one of them smell burnt, you're going to be looking at engine work and transmission work. Period. When you're going out to look at one of these cars, make sure you look at the rims and tires. If they're unevenly worn, you're definitely going to have to replace those tires, and that's usually an indication that you're going to need an alignment. The rims, I got lucky with these. The previous owner had sent them out to get them redone, and they look fantastic. A lot of times you're going to come across these cars with the rims are pitted and corroded, and it's just not nice looking. I wouldn't try spending the money to get rims like these, or get them redone unless you really want to. It's not cheap. Interior. On the interior, you're definitely going to be spending some money. If the interior needs to be redone, like the carpets of every single one that I've ever had, look absolutely horrible. And if you've watched the video of me replacing the carpets in this one, you can see that they look absolutely horrible. And that's about $800 just for the complete carpet set. And then there's the door panels and the plastic kick panel, and then there's the weather stripping, and then and the list goes on. So if you're planning on trying to get one of these, thinking that it's neat to do a project on one of them, you better understand that that cheap price is because the person before you has looked at what it's going to cost to get it to daily driver status. If you like this video, please smash that like button. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe, because it really does help out the channel and the YouTube algorithm. I want to thank you for watching, and you have a great day. Stay safe. The possible antifreeze leaks around the heads, depending on what years and whether or not you have the aluminum heads. There's going to be you're going to have to look for leaks coming into the cab, weather stripping around the windows and door frames. If your antifreeze is rusty looking or cruddy looking, most likely your heater core is either gone or going to go. That buildup is going to be throughout the entire engine, and you're going to have to do a flush to really get things going. You're going to have to look over the transmission. Looking over the transmission means you got to drive it. If the car doesn't drive, well, then you got a problem. Because the transmissions on these are, one, not easy to get out, and two, not easy to overhaul yourself. And if you're looking to keep the numbers matching on both the engine and the transmission to the car, you're going to want to bring it to a transmission shop that's not going to swap out your transmission. Let me say that again. You're going to want to bring it to a transmission shop that's not going to just swap out your transmission for one that was already rebuilt and put on a shelf. Alright? That has happened to me, and I had to fight to get the transmission back because it was a numbers matching car. It wasn't this one, it was another one in my past. And if there's rust around the top of the gas tank, it's usually an indication that rust has gotten into the tank. The seal will be 35, maybe 35 years old. So you got to take that into account. Open up the tank, see if you can put a flashlight down there, see the color of the gas in it, see if you see any rust. You know, you can try that. Don't use a lighter. Don't be an idiot. Next thing is the suspension. When you're driving down the road, take the steering wheel and shift it really fast back and forth. And if you hear some clunking or if it sways like a boat on water, you probably got some shocks you're going to look at. You're probably going to look at some bushings and all that within the actual suspension system, the A-arms to the body. You might even have to look at the spring in the back that goes from side to side. Corvette Ben found a spring on one of his C3 builds that had been broken apart, and I guess the customer was lucky they lived to get it to his shop, because I guess they drove it to his shop. But you can definitely check that out on his YouTube channel. A couple other things is the AC has been changed over. Does it currently work? Then you have your rear defroster in the back hatch glass. You're going to have to check the connections on that. They're at the bottom of the struts. Make sure they're not frayed, damaged, and then they connect to the window. Make sure that those connections are nicely still soldered on and are functioning nice. And if it upshifts really hard or doesn't, that's definitely an indication that there's something wrong with the transmission. First thing to check is the fluid level. On level ground, with it in neutral, running. Okay? It says so right on the dipstick for the transmission. So follow it. It may be an old way of doing it, but you still got to do it. As I mentioned earlier, these are 25 to 35 years old, and you're going to come across the sealant in between the body panels that they used at the factory. And you can see in my cowl video where I had to replace that sealant or reseal it, basically, to keep the water from going in between and getting into the car. There's also along the cowl weep holes that you have to clean out over time. You're going to clean those out or you're going to end up with water building up in the cowl and then getting into the car. There is a seal where the heater core goes against the firewall. There's holes in the firewall that the heater core comes out of, and there's a seal that goes around that. If that seal is old and crusty, you're going to get water coming in there. So you have to either replace that seal or get some electrical dope and put that around them to keep it out. It's basically waterproof silly putty, and it lasts forever. In fact, when you're test driving the car, you're going to want to take it out and not just around the block. You want to get out onto the highway and put your foot into it.